was supposed to be a quiet year. After years of moving from one cramped apartment to another, 26-year-old Nicole finally found a small but charming rental home just outside Tacoma, Washington. It wasn't perfect. The paint peeled a little at the edges of the kitchen, and the floor creaked when you walked past the stairwell, but it had character. Most importantly, it was hers. She'd moved in alone after a difficult breakup, craving space and peace. The landlord, an older woman with kind eyes, mentioned the house had been unoccupied for nearly a year, but she didn't say why. Nicole didn't press. She just wanted a fresh start. The first few nights were uneventful, aside from the usual settling-in sounds of an unfamiliar house. But on the fourth night, as she lay in bed scrolling through her phone, she heard something she couldn't ignore: a soft knock. Not on the door, on the wall, right behind her headboard. It was faint, almost hesitant. She froze. Her logical mind assumed it was old pipes, or maybe even an animal in the walls. But the knocking happened again. 3 slow, deliberate taps. Nicole didn't sleep that night. She sat rigidly on her bed, the lamp on, staring at the wall like it might move again. But after that second knock, the rest of the night remained eerily quiet. The next morning, she convinced herself it must have been a pipe or her own imagination playing tricks on her. Still, she moved her bed a few inches away from the wall just in case. Over the next few days, nothing happened. Then came the notes. The first one was found folded neatly and placed beneath her welcome mat. The handwriting was small, careful, almost childish. It simply said, "Why did you move the bed?" Nicole's blood went cold. She looked around her porch, the street empty. She asked her neighbors, but none of them had seen anyone near her place. She even asked the landlord, who seemed genuinely confused. Still, Nicole tried to dismiss it. A prank, maybe. But then a second note appeared. This one was in the kitchen, on the table. It said, "I liked when you slept near the wall." She hadn't left the back door unlocked. She was sure. Nicole started locking every door and window. She bought a camera for the living room and a motion-activated light for the back. But the knocking returned, sometimes behind the wall near her bedroom, other times beneath the floorboards in the hallway. Always at night. She stopped sleeping altogether. The final straw came when she noticed food missing from her fridge. Not everything, just little things. A yogurt cup, half a sandwich. She thought she was going crazy until one night, while reviewing the footage from her living room camera, she saw something impossible. Nicole didn't remember standing up, didn't remember walking across the room. All she remembered was the cold jolt in her spine as she watched that thing, that person, crawl from the vent and linger behind her couch. She paused the footage, heart hammering so hard it sounded like footsteps in her ears. The figure was lanky, gaunt, with a face blurred just enough to keep its features from being fully human. She called the police immediately. They arrived within minutes, took one look at the footage, and began a full search of the house. They checked every inch of her small rental cupboards, closets, under the bed, but found nothing. One officer, a younger guy, tapped on the wall near the bedroom and frowned. "Is there access to the crawl space behind here?" Nicole stared. "There's no crawl space." But the officer insisted. They went outside, and sure enough, behind the building siding was a narrow gap leading to a sub-foundation cavity, a small maintenance crawl space no one had mentioned. When they removed the outer panel, the stench hit them. Inside, bundled beneath a sleeping bag, was a man. Thin, dirt-covered, with scratches all over his face and arms. His nails were broken, his eyes wild. But there was something calculated in the way he stared at Nicole. Like he recognized her scent. He'd been living there for weeks. The officers pulled him out screaming. Nicole couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The man kept shouting something unintelligible as they dragged him out. Later, she found out what he'd been repeating. "You move the bed, you move the bed, you move the bed." The days after the arrest blurred into a haze of police reports, trauma counseling, and reporters who wouldn't stop calling. Nicole learned the man's name, Ethan Marsh. He'd been reported missing months earlier, but it turned out he wasn't really missing. He'd been stalking Nicole for over a year, ever since she posted a throwaway vlog from a coffee shop near her old college. That one video had shown enough clues for him to track her down. He followed her move, broke into her rental while she was out for groceries, and slowly carved out a life inside her walls, behind the vents, beneath the floors. He only came out when she was asleep or thought she was gone. Nicole's insomnia probably saved her life. The police later found a knife, a Polaroid camera, and a notebook filled with pages of her daily routines. Drawings, observations, fantasies. Some were violent. Most were obsessive. "She made me feel real," he had written in looping, jagged handwriting. Nicole never slept in that apartment again. She moved, changed her name online, deleted all her public posts. But it took months before she stopped waking up to imagine sounds. Months before she trusted the silence. And sometimes, when the wind pushes against the walls just right, she swears she still hears the whisper, "You moved the bed." Tyler worked at a quiet roadside diner nestled between two long stretches of highway in upstate New York. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills and gave him time to think. The diner had regulars, truckers, late-night students, exhausted travelers, but one customer stood out more than the rest. A young woman, always alone, always in the same corner booth. She wore a gray hoodie pulled tight around her face, and she ordered the same thing every time. Coffee, 2 creams, no sugar. At first, Tyler thought nothing of it. People liked routines, but something about her unsettled him. She never looked up, never touched her phone, and never, ever left any trace. No napkin scribbles, no receipts, no fingerprints, just the coffee barely touched. Over the weeks, Tyler tried to learn more about her. He watched from the counter, noting her every move, or rather, her lack of movement. She never ate, never drank, and always left exactly 20 minutes after she arrived. Never a second more. He once asked her name, and she looked up with eyes so hollow and flat it chilled him. "You can call me Sarah," she said, though he doubted that was real. One night, as Tyler was closing up, he found something strange tucked under the napkin dispenser at her booth, a photo. It was old, grainy, and in black and white, but it was unmistakable. It showed the interior of the diner from decades ago. The same booths, the same counter. But what made Tyler drop it wasn't the familiarity, it was the woman in the corner booth. Hood up, same posture, same cup of coffee. The photo was dated 1994. Tyler wasn't even born yet. He brought it home and stared at it for hours. He even asked the diner owner, an old man who'd inherited the place from his father. The owner's face turned pale when he saw the photo. "That's not funny," he muttered. "She used to come here, back in the 90s. Said she was hiding from someone. One night she just stopped showing up. Police found blood in the woods behind the diner, but never a body." That night, Tyler couldn't sleep. He felt watched. He began seeing glimpses of her in places she shouldn't be, reflected in his rearview mirror while driving, standing in the edge of a convenience store aisle, sitting on a park bench across from his apartment window. Always in that gray hoodie. Always alone. Tyler's world spiraled after that night. He stopped showing up for shifts, locked his windows, and disconnected his phone. But the silence made it worse. Every time he walked past a mirror, he feared catching a glimpse of her behind him. Every closed door seemed to breathe, and every creak of his floorboards sent shivers through his spine. Eventually, he gave in to the obsession and returned to the diner at night. He sat in her booth, drank her coffee, and stared at the empty seat across from him, whispering, "Who are you?" That's when his phone lit up. An unknown number. No caller ID. He answered with trembling hands, and the voice on the other end was soft, slow, and terrifyingly familiar. "You took my picture, Tyler." His blood ran cold. "I didn't." You opened the door, then static, then nothing. Tyler looked up and saw condensation forming on the window beside the booth, like breath on glass. Slowly, from the outside, a handprint formed, then another, and another, and then her face. Pale, expressionless, pressed to the glass. He bolted, ran into the kitchen, out the back door. But the alley was darker than he remembered, and in the dim orange glow of the streetlight, she stood there, hood still drawn, but her head tilted slightly to the side. Her voice didn't match her body. It was layered, broken, like 10 different people whispering in unison. "Come, sit with me." He didn't remember how he got home, but when he woke up the next morning, his door was wide open, his front window cracked, and that photo from 1994 was lying on his pillow. But now there was something new in the photo: Tyler, sitting across from her, in the booth. After that night, Tyler was never the same. He tried to convince himself it was a hallucination, maybe a psychotic break from too much stress and lack of sleep. He deleted the photo, changed his number, moved to a different city, and never told anyone the full story. But he couldn't escape her. He started seeing her in reflections, subway windows, rearview mirrors, even puddles on rainy streets. Sometimes it was just a blur of her silhouette. Other times, her full face, watching from a distance. She never moved, never spoke, but she was always there. One night, he heard a knock on the door. Just once. Soft. Deliberate. He froze. No one should have known where he lived. He waited an hour before checking. When he opened the door, no one was there. But taped to the peephole another photo. Same woman. Same booth. But this time, he was gone. Just her, smiling. Tyler doesn't leave his apartment anymore. He covered every mirror, turned off the lights. He whispers to himself now, over and over, "Don't open the door. Don't open the door." But deep down, he knows it doesn't matter. He already did. Most people associate stalking with someone following you in person or online. But what if it was more than that? What if it wasn't about just being watched, but being chosen, marked, and studied long before you ever knew? This story came from a former park ranger in Montana, and it has haunted me more than I can describe. It's not about cities, phones, or crowded sidewalks. It's about the vast open silence of nowhere, and a stranger who never should have been there. Sarah had grown up on the ranch. After her parents passed, she returned to live there alone, appreciating the isolation more than most. No neighbors for miles, no traffic, no noise, just endless golden fields and the occasional howl of a coyote. She had a routine: early mornings feeding the animals, long afternoons fixing fences or riding the ATV along the property line, quiet evenings with a book or the radio crackling with static. That's why she noticed when things began to feel off. It started with little things. The gate to the chicken coop unlatched, even though she was certain she'd closed it. A pile of chopped firewood stacked differently than she remembered. A door she never used creaking open one night with no wind. But out here, strange things happened. Animals, weather, age, she wrote it off. Until one night, sitting on her porch under the stars, she saw something move in the field. Not an animal, not a deer. A person. Still, watching. She stood up fast, heart hammering. But when she grabbed the spotlight and shone it toward the field, nothing. Just waving grass. She didn't sleep that night. She didn't call the police either. Who would she describe? A feeling? A shape? But over the next week, the pattern escalated. Her tools went missing, only to reappear in places she hadn't left them. Her dog, a loyal German shepherd named Max, growled at corners of the house and refused to go near the barn. At night, she would wake up certain she had heard footsteps on the porch, soft and careful, pacing but never fast enough to catch with a glance. One day, she noticed the scarecrow in the field wasn't facing the same direction. The straw hat now turned toward the house. She didn't own a scarecrow. Sarah couldn't deny it anymore. Someone was out there, living on her land, watching her, maybe even coming inside when she was gone. One morning, she found muddy footprints on her kitchen floor. Not hers, not fresh, but not old either. Max whined and paced the hallway, fur raised. That afternoon, she drove into town and bought security cameras, the battery-operated kind. Since cell service and Wi-Fi were nearly non-existent out here, She set them up around the house, the barn, and near the perimeter of the fields. That night, she stayed awake, her shotgun across her lap, staring out the window. Hours passed, nothing. She dozed off sometime around 4 a.m. The next morning, she checked the footage. One camera, the one facing the barn, was offline. Odd. The second camera showed something she'd never forget. At 2:14 a.m., a figure approached the side of her house. Slowly. They didn't walk like they were sneaking. They walked like they belonged. Calm, casual. Like this was their routine. They were wearing a hoodie pulled tight around their face, but the body language was unmistakably male. He stepped right up to her bedroom window and stood there for almost 45 minutes, still, watching, breathing. The camera caught the glint of something in his hand, a key. One of hers? Stolen? Found? Then he walked off, disappearing into the corn like smoke. Her hands were shaking as she rewound the footage again and again. She called the sheriff that morning. He drove out, listened, looked around, but there were no prints, no signs of forced entry, no proof the video hadn't been faked. Probably just a drifter, he said. Might have moved on. But Sarah could tell by the look in his eyes that he didn't believe that, and she didn't either. That night, she locked every door and window, armed herself again, and waited. At exactly 2:14 a.m., Max went berserk, barking, growling, scratching at the back door. Sarah crept through the house and looked through the side window. There, in the moonlight, stood the same man, only this time he wasn't alone. Sarah froze, hand gripping the shotgun so tightly her knuckles turned white. The man didn't move. He just stood there, but behind him, in the distance near the edge of the field, another figure emerged. Smaller, slighter, then another. 3 in total. None of them spoke. None of them approached. They simply stood there, barely illuminated by the moonlight, all facing the house, watching. Max's barking became frantic. Sarah moved to the back door, checking the lock again. Her mind raced. Was this a cult? A family? Had he been living out there with others this whole time, watching her every move? Was she being hunted? She backed away from the door, heart pounding so loud she thought they might hear it through the walls. She waited. Minutes passed. An hour. When she finally peeked outside again, they were gone. All of them. The only sign they'd ever been. There was a single muddy handprint on the window, smeared across the glass, like someone had leaned in for one last look. That morning, she packed her bags, left everything except the dog and a few essentials. She drove until she found a motel with people, with noise, with life. A few days later, she returned with the sheriff and a few deputies. They scoured the land. In the woods beyond her property, they found an old root cellar. Inside were blankets, empty food cans, photographs of her. Some taken from the woods, some through her windows. There were notes written in messy, childish handwriting about her routines, her clothes, her voice on the radio. They never found the man or his companions. Sarah sold the ranch, moved out of state. But sometimes, when she walks her new dog around the neighborhood, she gets the feeling she's being watched again. And every so often, late at night, the phone rings once. No caller ID, no voicemail, just silence.